it's not generally known just when bows or archery was invented. They're made out of wood with bows and arrows, and they're not durable like other artifacts that can be dug up and aged. But the best guess that we've been able to come up with is some 50,000 years ago. How they were invented or who invented them, we don't know. But we think maybe the little bow, the little bent stick with the string on it that was used to spin the little drill to make fire might have given the idea to somebody. It may even be that the little drill thing got misused and that the bow shot the arrow or the little drill out of it, and the idea came that way. It seems logical that that might have been the way it was done. Chinese made a bow. I'm not suggesting that the Chinese invented it, but they made a bow with a handle, and they still make them that way. They only make ceremonial bows nowadays, but the handle was about a third of the way up from the center, from the bottom of the bow, from the lower end of the bow. And our best guess on that is that the first bow was maybe a sprout from a tree or a stump, and that they put a string on it, and because it was thicker and heavier at the bottom, they had to hold it lower. And that may have suggested that all bows had to be built that way, because they still do it, but only, I think, for ceremonial effects they use. At least the modern archers use the kind of equipment we use now. The first bows, and the bows the English used, made history with them, were made out of yew, and they looked very much like this. They were narrow, they were flat in the back. The yew wood that they used, and this is a yew wood bow, it's a very springy material, and I think it came mostly from Spain. They didn't have any or very little yew in England, but this wood was available to them, and the milk bows were made, and they were crowned on the compression side, on the inside. And I don't know why it took so long, but it's only just 50 years ago that we discovered if that section were flat and the limb were wider, the bows would be much more durable. They wouldn't break so often because the stresses would be spread evenly. And actually, there were no change in the bow design over all those years until about 500 years ago. The Turks came up with the idea of a composite bow. And this, you may not seem like a bow, but it is. It's built over a form backwards. The center, there's a core section in there, same as there's a core section in all the bows that are made today. The back is sinew from animals, heel or loin tendons from animals. It's dried and glued on there on this wood centerpiece. And the compression, the sinew is on this side because the bow pulls around this way. It spreads around and pulls just the opposite direction. The sinew is on this side here, the back side, and then the core. And on the compression side is the horn of the Asiatic buffalo. And this bow shoots an arrow much, much faster. And matter of fact, even with our modern technology, we have only just recently, just in the last few years, exceeded the flight distances that the Turks shot an arrow. They shot arrows over 900 yards, and it's taken us a long time to catch up with them, but we've exceeded that distance now. But that was quite an advantage in a battle. If you could shoot an arrow further, in the battles, many of them were fought with clouds of arrows. If you could shoot and reach your enemy before before you're in range with his equipment, is quite an advantage. And the Turks did a great job with this bow, except they had to pick the days they're going to fight because they didn't have any waterproof glue, and if it got too wet down, they were out of business, and the war was over. Well, from this stage, the modern bow, the straight bow, like the English made out of yew, is now made usually a laminated wood and fiberglass. It was a war-borne material, and how we happened to use fiberglass in the bows. A salesman for Corning Glass Company in Corning, New York, he was an archer, a bow hunter, dropped into our shop in Detroit in the very early 40s. And he had a piece of fiberglass cloth. And I had never seen or heard of it. And I was very surprised that glass would be flexible like it was to be woven into a cloth like this. But I had not any great interest in it until he mentioned that it was elastic. He said that it was elastic and it was very strong, and it would stretch or compress, and unlike any other material, would always return to its original position until it was overstressed and it would break. Well, that interested me because if it was elastic, maybe it's the material we needed for the back of our bows. And so I asked him if he'd send me some of the cloth when he got back, and he said he would, which he did. And we were at that time doing some work for Chrysler, and we knew their head chemist there, whose name was Don Swayze, who had developed a cement or glue for bonding or gluing rubber to metal. First time it ever was heard of, and it was used to make rubber motor mounts so that the vibrations of the engine would not be transmitted to the frame. And of course, all motor mounts are made like that now. Well, I took this glass, and he invented this. They called it a cycle weld cement. 5509 was the name of it. I took this fiberglass cloth over to Don Swayze and said, "Can you coat this with your cycle weld cement and lay 3 or 4 layers together and cure it in the press? Cured at 325 degrees." And he said, "Yeah, sure." So he made us the first fiberglass bow material. We put it on some bows, and we found out that it worked fine on the extension side. It was a glass cloth, of course. It worked fine, did a beautiful job, made the bow unbreakable, but it was too strong for the on the compression side, the belly side, it wouldn't take it because it was a cloth, and the little fibers being bent like that would kink and break. So, but it was a good backing material, and but it was too strong, and it chrysaled the wood. It checked the wood. The wood wouldn't take the compression. So then, for it was a great backing material, and for about a year, we put aluminum on the face of it. And here's a bow with that aluminum on it. The aluminum was stronger. We cemented to it with the cycle weld cement, and it did a pretty good job. It stayed straight and took did the job it was supposed to do. But in the meantime, we got fiberglass thread or yarn and wrapped it on a wheel and cured it while it was turning to get a unidirectional glass where we didn't have to use the cloth. All the fibers were running in the same direction. And we got that on the bow, and we found that did the job. So here's the bow with the glass on the both sides, and that's the way practically all of the bows have been made in the last 30 years. And it did a great job because to the industry, if you wanted a good bow up until this time, until fiberglass was available, you had to seek out a fellow who probably had a workbench in his basement and had a natural ability as a craftsman and an eye for beauty. You had to get a hold of him and if you want a real good bow, and say, "Hey, how about making me a bow?" Well, he said, "Yeah, I'll make you a bow." And maybe sometimes he would say, "Well, you want to pick out the billets?" We're talking about the U-bow, of course. We also did the same thing with Osage Orange. maybe he had some billets there, and you could pick the billets out like you'd pick out the grain for a gun stock, and he'd make your bow in maybe 2 or 3 weeks or months. You would get it. And it was rather expensive, and its life was questionable because you never knew when they're going to break. Well, and to get the yew material, there were people out in the West. Yew came mostly from Oregon, up in the high mountains. The best of yew came at the higher altitudes, and there were people who would, with a pack sack and a lunch kit, maybe even a tent, walk around those mountains looking for a yew tree that had a long enough section in it to make a half a bow. Bows, all the good bows were made in billets that were only half the length. They're fishtail spliced in the middle. It was very difficult to get a piece 6 feet long without flaws in it. One of the problems was the yew wood has a berry on it, and bears like the berries, and when they climb a yew tree to get the berries, they usually tear the sapwood up with their claws sliding down. So that was one of the problems, and the source of the wood was very questionable. So finally, when fiberglass came along, you could work it with a micrometer. You didn't have to follow the grain. And you took a couple pieces of maple and glued it on the outside, and you had a bow that you could put into production. And for the first time in history, we had a bow that we could sell to the dealer at a discount, so he could make a little money, and he had it available to the consumer. And it's really one of the things that caused the rapid growth in archery and bow hunting that we've gone through in the last 30 years. The availability of good equipment at a reasonable price from sporting good dealers. The glass bow is very, very durable, much more durable than anything we had in the past. And as I said, that's one of the reasons for the popularity of bow hunting today. Not too long ago, it was discovered, well, actually the Turks discovered it, that if you curved the end of the bow limbs, the bow would be smoother to draw. It wouldn't tighten up so fast in the back end, and it would shoot an arrow faster. So we began to make bows, and this is only in the early 30s that we began to make bows with a, what do you call, a recurve. And this is a non-working recurve. It's stiff. And the way that it pulls and creates, gives it better speed, is because as you pull it back, the bow becomes longer. As the string leaves this recurve section here, the bow becomes longer, and that makes the weight pulling less at the back end of the draw. And then, not too long ago, we began making the bow, like many of them are made today, with a working recurve. This has the maple core and the fiberglass on both sides, and this does a better job of smoothing up the back end of the draw and gives you more speed to the arrow. That pretty much covers the bows of today, the conventional bows of today. And the next step, the biggest thing that's happened in archery in a great many years, is the compound bow. And that's the bows with the wheels on the ends and the cables. The handle is usually magnesium, could be wood. The limbs are usually laminated like the conventional longbow, but could also be solid fiberglass. We have cams or eccentrics on the end here, and what they do is every other type of bow, it gets heavier as you pull it back. This bow, it gets easier as you pull it back by as much as 50%. So you can have a 50-pound bow that pulls 50 pounds up here, and when you get back to full draw, to the length of the arrow, it drops off to 25 pounds, and it's quite an advantage because it's very easy to hold 25 pounds as against holding 50 pounds while you're aiming. And so this bow is, the compound bow is taking over, and about 9 out of 10 of the bows that are sold